It's Don here from the board. Thanks for coming along and checking out this video. So the last two videos or so, you've seen some stuff that I've been doing with the laser engraving and working on doing laser Dyesub keycaps. And today we are continuing on that journey and doing a bit of, I suppose, keycap science. Maybe not keycap science, maybe more Dyesub science. So what I'm talking about is what happens if you try to laser Dyesub different colors. So what I've gone out and obtained now is I've got some primary colors happening here, and so I've actually purchased some iDye Poly yellow and iDye Poly blue, and of course by themselves what I've done already now is I've coated two white keycaps down here, one with the yellow paste. It looks brown, but it's meant to be yellow. When it's actually washed off, it dilutes down to yellow, so it's quite a dense, intense color. And then this almost black looking keycap is actually the blue. Yes, you've got your pencils. So where is the science going? Well, we know that we can already use black and we can laser etch that onto a keycap, and this is just a random test pattern I drew as part of proof of concept. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to laser Dyesub yellow and blue onto these two base caps, and then I want to actually color mix the opposite color. Because if we look at primary color mixing, yellow and blue should make green. So if I have this yellow base and I put blue on it, will I get a green Dyesub keycap? And if I have this blue, depending on how dark blue it is, if I put the yellow on top of it, am I going to get a dark green? So it's really more of a, will it work? Will they blend? Or will it end up looking black the entire time? So that's where we're going with all of this, and this is just the intro to it. What is going to happen next is probably going to be some time-lapse clips of me actually burning some patterns onto it, and then washing it, and then coating it with the second layer, and then burning that again, and then hopefully at the end of the video we're going to actually see the end result and talk about that process. But the only thing that I want to talk about before I get into that is I've applied the slurry onto this, and it's actually dried and it's flaking off the top of the keycap. And what that is telling me is that, well, water as a solvent for this iDye Poly is only really turning it into a suspension as suspected, and applying it to the top of the keycap, it's only being held there essentially by surface tension. It is non-bonding at all in its form like this. So I could scrape and flake it off and it would come off with no trace whatsoever, whereas that heat energy that is being applied to it from the actual laser is causing it to be absorbed by the keycap. So that is kind of pretty much a confirmed aspect. So hopefully we will see on the other side of the next bit of this video, two keycaps and the end result. Alrighty, so we are back for the wrap up, I guess, and check out on what actually happened. Now, of course, what you're seeing up here in the corner is because I've got a very bright light happening, so I can get a bit more illumination on the keycaps, because as you can kind of see on the screen right now, I've got my magnification going. So we saw very briefly, if you were paying attention to the time lapse for the couple of frames that you might see there, that I had covered the keycap with the yellow. I'd completely lased it, and then I put on a square of, well, a rectangle of blue. So, and this is what that looks like. So I'll just try and get that into focus. Now you can see the actual raster lines from the laser. They're very distinct. There is actually a little bit of gap and separation between each line. Interestingly, the amount of laser power and the raster speed was burning the yellow dye. So the dye itself is very much sensitive to the laser heat, whereas, you know, when you're doing a black medium, you probably don't really notice it. So that's a bit of an issue. So, you know, there was actually enough heat from the laser that it was both coloring it yellow, as you can see, and it was actually enough to be burning the dye black, because I can't actually rub that off. I can't actually scrub that off. Now, when I applied the blue, as you can see the rectangle, and then I went over that with the laser, what you can see there is slightly reduced laser power and a faster raster time. So I'm not seeing that black burning, and I'll show you the blue one just in a moment, but if we have a look at the effect of overlaying the blue onto the yellow, well, you do get kind of a green effect, but it is under a very bright light. However, in a non-bright light, it actually looks almost black, and you kind of expect that because the blue is actually very dark. But in this bright lighting, it does actually have that green tinge. So color theory is working. The translucency, the opacity of the actual Dyesub on the surface does actually enable mixing. So that's really great, but it's just not very noticeable because the yellow is such a pale yellow and the blue is such a dark, strong blue. So you're going to get that dark green color. And we can see, you know, the lip around that square that's got that green to it, that doesn't have any yellow, is that blue on top. So that was really cool. I'm very happy with that. So then if we think about, you know, when you do say watercolors compared to when you do say oils, the layers are different. With watercolors, you always start with light underneath and then you apply dark, because if you put dark and then you put light on top, you won't see what's happening. Whereas with oils, you put down darks and then you actually mix lights into it, which lighten the darks. At least that's what I believe is the case. So now we have a look at the blue keycap, and once again you can see the raster pattern. Now I'd actually lased it this way, left and right, as you would see in the time lapse, but you know, just for holding it up. So having the dark blue underneath, there is no burning on here because I had adjusted the power for this. So I'd reduced it slightly. The setting became, because I was using 30 laser power and 15 depth, and this has now been reduced for this blue to 25 laser power and 10 depth. And you can see it was actually still producing enough energy that this blue is pretty permanent. It's not going anywhere. But when you put the light on top of it, it's a much more noticeable lighter green compared to the color that we were getting over here. So that's really cool. That's really interesting. So you can actually color mix your own Dyesub keycaps. And if I put these side by side, you'll notice the effect is very different. The contrast is very different. In the green, the depth of green, the color that you're getting you know, and you could attribute some of the darkness on this cap over here on the left because of the yellow being burnt, but in the patches that aren't being burnt, the patches that aren't burnt as kind of around here, for example, just there's like a little strip here, it's still lighter green on this right hand side than on this left hand side. So that's very encouraging, which means if you can get yourself a jig as well as you count you know, where your start and finishing marks, and you're very good at lining up your laser positioning, and you have a much better system than I've got with this very rudimentary way of setting it up, you could do multicolored Dyesub using the laser. Why would you want to? Good question. I don't know. Because, you know, we've already seen other techniques where people are printing onto special paper with Dyesub ink, and then they're using like a heat press to actually press keycaps with their multicolored prints that absorbs into the top of the keycap. But if you don't want to go to that full expense, then at least for single color or dual color, you can have a bit of fun, and you can, you know, get a bit creative and, you know, maybe do a bit of modernist art keycaps like what these test keycaps have ended up. So, you know, I don't know how much more I'm going to do in this series and play around with these keycaps and Dyesubbing, but it's definitely very much a viable and, I suppose, cheaper kind of option, because from memory I think you did have to outlay quite a bit to be able to get, you know, the inks and the cartridges and the paper, and then of course you had to get a heater and a method of pressing it down and getting it right temperature, whereas this laser method seems to be relatively easy and quick to tweak and adjust and get a result that kind of works. So there you go, there you have it. There is 2 laser Dyesub keycaps within you know, a bit of it took about 47 minutes to do both of these, but that was the 4 runs, including the time to wash them as well as to apply the slurry. So, you know, I wouldn't exactly recommend that to be a business venture, should I say, especially if you're doing long burn times, because then you got to let the laser cool down and stuff like that. But if you have a workflow and you can have slurry and you can apply the paste and, you know, get stuff going, then certainly it could be an option for you to have fun with that. So there you go. Laser color mixing on PBT Dyesub is a go. Fully viable, and it works. It works. Well, now if you like this video, then of course I would love it if you would be able to hit that like button, you know, subscribe if you've not subscribed and you've somehow come across this channel. Please share this if there's anybody that you think might be interested in doing something like this, or have talked about it and want to do a bit of keycap art and Dyesubbing, you know, especially if you've got some leftover poly dye as well and stuff like that. And yeah, leave your comments below on what you think, anything else that you want to chat about and ask about. So thanks very much for checking out the video, and of course, as usual, until next time, happy clacking.